Mike, you and I have a lot of conversations around content and commerce. It's a topic that's coming up with customers constantly. And I think there's a lot of confusion on what content and commerce really is. So I think it would be great if we could start off with a little bit of a definition.
Sure. You're right, Carrie. Content and commerce is a kind of a broad concept that really, I guess, has been around for a while. People started using the term headless commerce as kind of a demonstration of how to achieve it. But really, it's the connective, um, more engaged content that you need for really meaningful experiences with commerce today. So when you marry how businesses transact with the right content at the right time, businesses see greater success. So the real initiative in there is to provide more than just a catalog or, attributes of a product, but really the engaging, meaningful information to the right people at the right time.
So Mike, as we're talking about this, do you think, in business terms, right? I think about it a lot is we have all these brand sites, right? And then we've created all these separate commerce experiences. And primarily we do that because we don't want to disrupt our channel or we don't want to cause any friction or confusion. And what we really create is a lot of friction and confusion. And as we talk about the buying journey, right, we talk about the fact that um, there are different things, regardless if you're doing B2B, B2C, D2C, whatever term you want to use, there's a lot of things you want to accomplish, right? And one of them is you want to capture the user and get them to transact, whatever that means for you and your business while they're engaging. So when you send them to another link to send them off to a different experience, and often those other experiences are completely different from the experience they were on, the opportunity is to bring those experiences together and really align to the buying journey. Let marketing do their marketing, right? Let them guide the user with content into a consideration stage or a research stage and continue to work them through that journey. How the order gets fulfilled can be multiple different ways, right? We're not talking about fulfillment at this point, but we're really talking about that whole concept of bringing those experiences together. Does that make sense to what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think the separation in some cases just been who had what piece of software.
Right.
Marketing got an experience platform or a CMS platform, and IT got a transactional commerce or ERP system. And so there was this division simply because the technology made it so, and they didn't connect well enough. And that's why I mentioned earlier, headless commerce has really become a term that people have tried to unify those two because they realize that both play half a role and neither play the entire role well.
Very true. So one of the topics we talk a lot about when we're considering our clients are considering content and commerce is who's going to own the glass. I know that I've been in conversations with clients when we're working where that is the entire like multiple day discussion is glass ownership, right? Why is glass ownership so
Mhm.
important, Mike?
Well, it's really who gets to control the experiences perceived by the person. And in some cases, the glass isn't necessarily the glass on a screen now. It's or an application even. It can be the thing you connect that engages with somebody like I won't say her name, but Amazon's favorite personal assistant. Um, that really is the thing that gives you the meaningful engagement you want. So it's really important because the system or systems, depending on how you implement it, that are going to provide the glass ownership and provide the experience. And if you get that wrong, or the systems that you use can't provide the type of compelling experience that someone's demanding out of you, then you won't be successful in what you're trying to accomplish. So it is a big negotiation. In some cases, it's a little bit interpolitical, um, or intra-political in some cases even, because the experience is traditionally viewed as someone else's, and surrendering it from my system that I'm familiar with is a little concerning because that experience is mine to control as either a marketer or a seller, and to really understand that it goes the expectation of that customer is well beyond what you've traditionally had available to you is difficult for people to get their head around.
Yeah, and so that's a great point, right? So when we talk about glass ownership, some of the things that we really think about is what are the different implementation models? How can
Mm.
I achieve what I want to achieve? What's the right approach, right? Headless gives you the impression that um, the CMS owns everything, right? And that's not necessarily the case. We talk a lot about that an application is going to be content led. And when it's content led, we're talking about the fact that the CMS is taking the lead, right? But there's reasons you make that decision. That is not like, oh, that's what I'm going to do and here's why, right? I'm just going to do that. Because I think that's where people can get themselves in trouble is that they think that that's the only way. So when we talk about content led, Mike, what are some of the pros of going content led in your mind?
Well, um, the content led in the I guess most complete case where you have the glass owned by the traditionally non-transactional part of a commerce experience really gives you the benefit of separating the heavyweight experience that you get when IT becomes involved in building and changing the transactional portion of someone's commerce site. And that's, yeah, anyone with any kind of experience in this environment knows building that is the heavy labor intensive, very slow to perfect because there's a lot of testing and quality assurance that goes along with that process, and it's usually a heavier IT cycle to implement that kind of change because it affects many systems and there's back end implications. And so if you decouple it, the experience in the content side, and you have it content led, and you leave the transactional systems to that burden. Every time you want to change an experience that is non-transactional or doesn't require a change in the transaction, you've unlocked the business from making that an IT request. You've now empowered the business to really create and curate the experience and content that's right for a customer, which is very rapid time to market and doesn't require a lot of IT intervention to pull off the quick change. So you become very, very more agile as a business in that, and you hand over a lot more of the responsibility of content curation and publishing to the business side and out of IT's hands, which can be a benefit, but can also be a bit of a scary proposition because it requires a level of maturity on the business side that may not have the operational
Right.
capability yet to really pull off.
But yeah, we talk a lot about when you're doing content led, right? It doesn't mean you're rebuilding all the product information. It's very common in a content led scenario that your product information is still coming from your product information management system as it should, right? You want to have
Hmm.
your content, your product content, if you have a product information management system or a PIM, that you're enriching that content and keywording and SEO optimizing and enriching that content in the PIM because oftentimes you're supplying multiple channels, right? You're not just supplying that product information to your website. There may be other places you're using that, and you want that to be in a consistent experience across how you're supplying that information. And you're supplying it in a relevant manner. So we're not talking about that you just rebuild that. So Mike, I think that there's examples of companies' product count, um, product complexity, or product types that really help drive a content-led solution, as opposed to one of the other options we're going to talk about in a little bit. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the right scenario for the right organization and the right type of business. Um, but it is a challenging thing to define across a broad spectrum because you can have businesses who sell 10 products but require incredibly dense amounts of content to explain them because they're complex products. You can have um, distributors who sell 200,000 products, but the products are more commodity based, and there's not the decision making that goes on, and there's not really an experience that's required to the same level of precision. So to me, it's not really so much about uh, quantitative number, it's more of a qualitative number. And it's understanding your customer and what the customer's needs are, demands are, or engagement preferences with you, or their own maturity with the products you sell. How much you have to facilitate that engagement, educate the customer, and create the loyalty and trust and confidence in the product to allow them to actually place the order. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with because they bring their own kind of bias to their product line, to their website, because well, I know my product, so should my customer. And that's usually not the case. I'm often right now talking to people about, um, yeah, we've used the expression since COVID about the Great Resignation. But there's a lot of people rolling over their buyers. The younger generation are picking up being a buyer now because the older ones are retiring. And that puts a different digital demand, but a different level of competency in your products that you've sold to that channel for 20 years. It's time to re-educate people on those products and understand that in those cases, if you're in that scenario, you need more engaging content for a
Right.
less mature buyer. So it's very complicated, and it very much comes down to who you're trying to sell to and what their needs are, as opposed to any kind of product metric.
Right, but we see, so I see, I a lot of times people need some guidance on like which is the right approach, right? And I often think about it as when you have less products, your products are not overly complex, right? And or you have unique products, right? You're selling a service, you're selling something that's not
Hmm.
like a traditional physical product. Content led can be a great solution in those scenarios when you really want to market, when they're very targeted to a consumer as well. I think also helps with that fit. But the thought you have to think about is, do we have, as Mike mentioned, that maturity to be able to do this, maintain this? And then you also have to start thinking about what happens as you get into the actual buying journey, right? We don't want you to be marketing. We're seeing more and more trends in commerce, as an example, where the headers and the footers go away when people enter that buying journey. Why? We don't want to distract them from buying, right? That's what we want them to do when they're
Hmm.
there. So there's a lot of considerations, and I think what you said is true, Mike. It's not a one and done, right? It is, but those are considerations that you have to make as you're thinking about this, regardless of what your solutions are. It is solution independent, platform independent as you're making these decisions.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
let's talk
There's
about
the
commerce led.
platform is sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the platform should be the one that enables what you've already predetermined
Right.
as the right thing to do, as opposed to being told what to do by your platform. That's,
Right.
that's a recipe for disaster to
That is
avoid.
a recipe for disaster. So let's talk about commerce led, right? Same scenario. You have a lot of products. They're very dependent on product information management systems. They're very a big percentage of your products are traditional. Um,
Hmm.
and your main purpose of the site is we want people to transact. We want people to buy. We want them to convert in a buying format. So let's talk about
Hmm.
commerce led, Mike. What does that really mean when we talk about it's commerce led?
That's traditional. The more traditional, if you knew commerce back in 2000s, 2010, all the way up to 2015, you really were running a commerce application, and that application owned the glass, owned the transaction, was probably the place where you curated the catalog to some degree, made it digital ready, because it was loaded from an ERP system. So it's that more monolithic traditional commerce application that was a one-stop shop for all your needs to take a business online. And so that's a commerce-led system that couples the catalog, how you transact, how you check out and take an order with the web pages that are generated for the customer experience. And there's benefits there, like you described, because if it is a large commodity based catalog, there's not a ton of need to separate. Do I need to give the most meaningful experience for buying toilet paper? Probably not. So if there's a lot of cleaners and products that are just ready to go, it's about inventory and price, and that's what you compete on. Commerce led, it's not a bad fit because you're focusing on the details, the transaction, the inventory availability, the price, and as the experience. You're not creating the new Nike fashion content to really promote Tiger Woods' return to the Masters or whatever might be the flavor of the day, in order to sell those products, because that experience isn't necessary. So you're right. Those ones that are all about confidence in you as the provider of the product, and you're really competing on confidence that I can get you the right product at the right price at the right time, guaranteed. You can trust that I'll deliver on that commitment to you. Um, Commerce focused, commerce led transactions and experiences are a good play.
Exactly. And we do see that. There are scenarios where that is the right answer. Um, and so it's always a great consideration when you're thinking about it. And now let's talk about, I think, one of the ones that the models that we talk about a lot in our business is the hybrid model. What
Mhm.
is a hybrid model? What does that mean?
So hybrid is a best of both worlds, or a concession on both sides, depending on your perspective. But it's the realization that um, some amount of your site is dynamic and really engaging. And if you look at the sitemap of an experience and how someone goes through that experience, there are moments in time and certain pages and certain sections of your website that are really influential, and they should be driven by a content system. So, because the engagement model and experience can be tailored much more effectively. So, if you come to a landing page for like a sporting event again, the Masters, or someone who's looking to buy replacement parts for a furnace, and their entry point is discovering that you sell or provide that. You're at the point of engagement where content becomes really important and significant to that individual. And so having a hybrid solution that moves that portion to a headless, content-driven experience is really meaningful because it empowers your business to engage in a meaningful way at that time. But once you check out, I'm always asking, do you really need to tailor the checkout experience? Or is it the time of, I'm about to check out now, I click that one click buy button, or I go through an order flow. Um, does that need to change? Is that part of the experience that you need to
Right.
curate and tailor? Or is that really just the transaction kicking in? And is it worth the investment of making that a content driven experience? Probably not in most cases, at least not as a starting point. Likewise, the like my account section or my order history. Do you need to change a lot of that beyond just maybe putting a logo or a product recommendation in there? Do you really need to change the page itself or the experience someone has when they go there? Probably not. There are cases you do, but in many cases, especially to get started, a hybrid model makes a lot of sense because it's not the investment in the right place, for you to at least start down the journey of content and commerce.
Yeah, when we're looking at companies that have traditional products, right? Maybe a little bit more complex than your toilet paper example. But in those scenarios, a lot of times when we're talking about hybrid, we say we really think about who owns the glass, right? This is where the glass ownership really comes in. And when you're talking about a hybrid model, it's a combination, right? You may have your marketing pages, all these CMS pages, then you get to a product category page as an example. That could be still content led, could be
Hmm.
commerce led at that point. But when you start getting into product list pages and product detail pages, you're definitely going into, in a hybrid model, those pages we recommend generally are the glasses owned by the commerce because you don't want to be marketing in those pages and you really want people to do the add to cart. And a lot of that information in that example is also coming from that product information management system again. But you're not changing it. You don't want to be changing it, right? And to your
Hmm.
point, if you're not going to be changing it, then you, and it's really coming from that third party system, and there's no reason to be marketing on those pages, then in a hybrid model, there's a lot of value to leverage commerce on those pages because it's designed to get them through that buying journey. And you're just
Hmm.
building on that experience, and you're talking about things like cross sell opportunities or related products, and you're having the opportunity to really guide them through that buying process. And so that's where we talk a lot about why a hybrid model can work for a lot of businesses.
Hmm. Yeah, we're seeing it definitely as a trend as people move down this path because it lowers the complexity and quite honestly the cost of entry.
Right.
It puts the focus on the greatest priority for you as you move towards a more content driven environment.
However, as we talk about these different models, Mike, and we start thinking about them, and we talk about content led or commerce led or a hybrid model, we still have two systems that are ultimately working together. So there are definitely some other key considerations that people need to think about when they're getting into this journey. And I know one of the biggest ones we like to talk about when we're with our clients is search. Why is search so complex in a content and commerce model?
Well, search has evolved from the early days of commerce, which was just navigating and searching and cross-sectioning your catalog. The database of your product SKUs and the attributes of them, to really searching across all they use the term in technology, structured and unstructured data, but it's really your content, the collateral you produce, the content you produce, the catalog you have, the information available to it. People don't just want to search and have to know the SKU or the short description of a product in order to find it. They want to search on the terminology and language they understand. Couch, sofa, Chesterfield are all the same thing, but depending on where you are in the world and what you know that is, the same search result could be very different depending on the word used. And so when you separate the catalog from the content that's produced, it becomes a challenge to aggregate those two systems together, those two fractured artifacts to load up search and have search function and behave in the proper way. So both a content-driven environment, an experience management system, or a content management system will have the ability to provide search. Any commerce system will have the ability to provide search, and you can grab a third-party search solution and have it run all search. But in order to unify that, you have to take care and understand when you take this approach, how are you going to bring all that content together under one search solution so that it engages when people choose to use search, which a lot of people do. You don't lose or have to choose which content you want to describe to that customer, which one you want to serve through search or teach search or artificial intelligence about, so that it can be engaging and meaningful, and you're not leaving things behind with the choice you've made.
Yeah, we talk a lot about search. There's so many considerations, and there isn't a single answer, right? Every company has different answers and outcomes when we have this conversation. So it's just important that people understand like that they have to think about search as part of their implementation considerations, regardless of what model they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Also hit on, I mean, that includes your faceted search, right? When you're talking about, I want to be able to leverage faceted search, same thing, right? I want to narrow my products or my categories. I want to be able to narrow my search options through faceting. That's still a consideration of how that looks like, and it's important for people to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched, and the other big piece that we talk about, and you touched on it lightly, is the concept of content, right? Structured and unstructured. So let's pivot quickly and talk a little bit about those, the implications that structured and unstructured data also have. And let's not talk about it as data, let's talk about it as content when you're doing a content and commerce experience.
Okay. Yeah, the delineation is best understood as the structured data, structured content is really traditionally the things around your catalog that fits in the fields, of an ERP system or some database, so that you can see the same content over and over again across all catalogs. So the attributes and the descriptions are structured content. They're easily navigated because you can predict where they come from and what their content's going to be and restrict. Is it a number? Is it a letter? So it's pretty easy to navigate that information. But when you're talking about rich media as content, that's unstructured data. So videos, PDFs, warranty cards, all that has some structure, but really varies from piece to piece. So the unstructured data has historically been harder to navigate in traditional systems. That's why search solutions that could provide structured and unstructured data search and contextualize it and make it meaningful. So whether you're searching for the word, I don't know, replacement as part of a SKU in a search solution, it won't just be limited to what the structured content is around your product, but it will actually find the warranty card or the replacement card or the exploded diagram that will show you the replacement parts, because those words are part of the unstructured PDF that's maybe 112 pages. And some will actually find you the right page within that PDF and tell you it's on page 87. So it's very important to understand that when you're taking this sort of content view of content in commerce, that the structured and unstructured content is navigable in the right way and indexable by search solutions. So it's not, typically they've been siloed into different locations because they're authored in different environments. And in order to aggregate that together to search, you really do need to take search into consideration and understand how both can be brought together to make search function the way people expect it to.
Right. And it's often that blended approach that can be complicated, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the search. And so there's lots of ways to solve for that, but there are definitely considerations that we want people to understand as they're making decisions, right? You want to know what you're getting into. You want to make the right decisions. You want to structure your content and commerce experience correctly so that you're not having to go back and redo things in the future because you made those big mistakes
Mm-hmm.
that really are structural mistakes that are harder to fix than if you just made a small mistake. As we kind of move out of this, Mike, I think this was a great conversation. I know that we've talked a lot about a lot of different things in our series on content and commerce. And this is really getting into those considerations when you start talking about platforms and bringing those technologies together. As we're wrapping this up, Mike, is there anything else that you think is really important for people to think about? Or do you feel like we've pretty much covered the topic pretty thoroughly in the time we had?
Yeah, I think the only other common message out there is understand that it's a journey. It's not a big bang. Understanding a roadmap of how you evolve towards a more content and commerce approach. Don't take off more, bite off more than you can chew. It should be an evolution, not a revolution. So building a plan that's achievable, given that in many cases, you have an existing day job. You're not going to overhaul how you function as a business overnight, but a way to evolve in meaningful ways that produce better ROI and you see dividends on the effort is sort of key to build a plan that gets you to, I think, where many people ultimately want to head as a business.
I agree. Well, thanks for your time today, Mike. It's always great to have these conversations with you, and I hope that everybody learned a little bit.
Thanks so much, Karie.